What is up guys, Bulbasaur here and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you how to paint this very happy Beast of Nurgle. Now the skin on this model is painted almost entirely with dry brushing techniques. I learned these techniques from an artist opus video where he painted this really epic great unclean one, and it was so cool that I wanted to try to replicate those techniques on this model. This model is definitely one of my favorites that I've ever painted, and I'm really happy with the results. With that, let's just jump into the video. Don't forget to prime your model. I'm using Style and Res Black. The first step of the process is to base coat the model using blues and purples. And you want to put the dark blues in the shadow sections and the purples in the brighter sections. Now, the first color I'm using is a dark blue, and I'm getting this by mixing blue and black together. I'm putting this blue in all of the dark shadow sections of the model, like underneath his belly and underneath his arm. The paint here is pretty wet, the brush is a little bit damp, and what I'm trying to do is push the paint into all the cracks and crevices in the skin. This is going to give me a nice uniform base coat. For the second color, I'm mixing purple in with my existing paint to create a dark purpley blue color. And then I'm applying this to all of the sections right above the dark blue that I just painted on the model. Again, I'm using a damp brush here. The goal here is to create a very strong, cohesive base coat. For the third and final color, I'm just taking purple and applying this to all of the most light facing sections on the skin. So this would be the tops of his tail, the top of his shoulder and arm, and his face. At this point, I realized that there were some sections on the model I couldn't get to, so I switched to a smaller size brush and then repeated those same steps in those sections. That completes our base coat of the skin. Before adding our greens and yellows to the skin, the next thing to do is to dry brush all of the skin area with pallid witch flesh or any white of your choice. For this dry brush layer, I'm using a textured surface to dry brush off excess paint before applying it to the model. And when I do apply it to the model, I am starting in the area that I want to be the brightest. This is going to make sure that any heavy-handed brush strokes land in this area, or if you have too much paint on your brush, the paint is going to smudge where you want it to be brightest, so it's not going to be as noticeable once you finish dry brushing the whole model. This step creates highlights all over the model, and as you can see, this model is a perfect recipient for dry brushing. There's so much detail in the skin, and with the color choices of the base coat, all of the recesses now have this nice cool color tone to them, and that is going to make the model look really good once we start applying our greens and yellows. For the colored layers, we're going to apply them from dark to light, starting with a mixture of purple, blue, and green, and then moving on to our more yellow greens, and then our bright yellows and white. This is going to create some nice variation in the skin and make the model look really good. For the first color, I'm going for this aquatic green color that I got by mixing purple, green, and blue. This is going to be the darkest dry brushing layer on the model. Now, you can see here I'm using a twisting motion again to get off the excess paint so that when I apply it to the model, I can use a very light touch and apply this paint to all the white areas in the shadow sections of the model. I'm not applying this layer everywhere on the model. I'm just focusing on places like his underbelly here, the place under his arm, and all the most recessed areas in the skin. What we're doing here is we're just coloring in the shadows, is how I like to think of it. And on to the next layer, you can see here that I'm poking my brush on my damp sponge to keep the bristles wet. This is going to help the paint exit onto the model. I'm using pure green for this layer, and this is going to be a transition color from the layer that we just laid on the model. So basically you want to paint this on all the areas in between the dark shadowed areas and the remaining areas on the model. For the next layer, I mix Death Guard green and flat green to create more of a yellow green, And then I applied this above all of the sections where I had painted the previous layer. This is another transition step and just adds some additional green tones to the model. The brighter sections on the model, I mixed buff, death guard green, and moot green to create a very vibrant, bright green color. And then I applied this to all of the most light facing sections on the model. So this would be the top of his tail, the top of his arm, and his face. Before dry brushing on the bright yellow color, I took a step to dry brush all of the brightest areas on the model using pallid witch flesh. At this point, the model should look desaturated, but have some nice cool undertones. Now, for the last step on the skin, what I'm doing is I'm taking pure lemon yellow and dry brushing this all over all of the white sections on the model. This is the final step for the skin. When I first got my Beast of Nurgle, I wasn't quite sure how to approach painting the skin because it was so detailed, but this dry brushing method worked perfectly for me. If you're looking for a quick way to paint the skin on your Beast of Nurgle, this is definitely a good way to do it. And with the skin done, now it is time to start painting in all of the various details on the model. The first thing that I'm doing is I'm going to paint all of the bulbous pustules on the model. I'm using buff here, and for the next couple steps, I'm just applying base coats. After base coating all of the bulbous pustules, I then took Death Guard Green and colored in all of these nozzle looking things out of the side of his body. To me, these look like some sort of toxic emitters, but I think they're a nice touch to the model and they look really cool. After that, I mixed purple and red together to create a nice magenta color, and then I used this to paint his mouth and all of the cuts on the body. Sometimes when painting a model, there's a step in the process that brings the model to life for you. For me, painting in these magenta sections was that step. Seeing the color contrast between the magenta and the green and yellow skin looked really good to my eye, and for some reason I just really enjoyed this process, and it was super satisfying to see all these sections get colored in. After painting in the mouth and the cuts on his body, it was now time to base coat his hair, and this took a long time. For the base coat, I just used that same magenta color, and I ended up using a fatter brush to try to move a little bit faster because it was pretty tricky base coating all of these individual tentacles. The hair is easily one of my favorite things about this model. It's just so crazy and tube-like. They really did a good job designing this. After the base coat, it is now time to start highlighting the different sections on the model. For the first highlight, I'm mixing skin tone and purple to create a purpley skin tone color and using this to highlight his mouth. Now when highlighting his mouth, I'm focusing on all of the raised areas and I'm taking my time. This is a really fun step of the process, and you can see here that I've even highlighted the inside of his mouth for extra detail. On this step, I do a couple layers of highlights, and to get the brighter color, I just mix in layer into my existing paint mixture to get a more yellowy skin tone color, and then I apply this to all of the same sections that I applied the previous layer. After applying those highlights, I created a magenta glaze or filter. You can see here that I'm adding in water here to water down this mixture so that it is very thin. You can kind of see the paint consistency here is pretty watery. The paint separates on its own, but it's not too thin that it stays apart. Now on this step, I am just washing over this entire area, primarily focusing on where I made the highlights. This is going to smooth transitions between the dark recesses and the brighter highlights. After this, I then just go back over top and highlight again using my previous highlight color for the final highlight. And now for the bulbous pustules, I wanted to make them look a little bit green. So what I do here is I created a green wash, or you could even say it's a filter. All I'm doing here is I'm just watering down some flat green paint and then applying this on each bulbous pustule. Now, I'm pushing the paint with the brush into the recesses because what I'm going for here is I want the areas closest to the body to be darker green, while the main face of the bulbous pustule to be brighter. After applying that glaze, I then re-highlighted these areas using buff. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I want all of these individual pustules to stand out on the body. I think they add a nice touch and they look pretty cool. These types of things make Death Guard models really unique in my opinion. For the teeth and nails, I base coated them black and then applied some light highlights using a gray color. I only applied 2 highlight layers, and for these highlights, I was using the edge of my brush and really trying to take advantage of the sculpted detail in the model to bring out the highlights. To highlight all of the wounds or gashes in his body, I mixed white, red, and yellow to create a bright pink flesh tone, and then I applied this within all the sections. When painting these, I got pretty stressed out because these things are really narrow, but I think that with a little bit of patience and a steady hand, you should be able to do this with no problem, but it was pretty difficult for me. All right, and now it's time to paint his crazy hair. So on the box art, the hair transitions from dark purple to a light flesh tone. So I figured I should start with the dark purple as it's the darkest color and then try to blend in the other colors. For the dark purple, I'm mixing in blue, purple, and black to create something that's really dark. And then I used a large brush and just tried to quickly paint this over the top third of each tube. He has tons of tubes, so the section took longer than I wanted, but because I was using a larger brush, it was a little bit faster. After finishing base coating all of the tubes, I wanted to smooth the transitions between magenta and the dark purple. So to do that, I created my magenta color again and then turned it into a glaze by watering it down quite a bit. So what I'm doing here is I'm just adding water to the mixture till it's the right texture, and then I get my brush fully loaded and then wipe off the excess moisture on a paper towel. When applying these layers, I'm moving the brush from dark purple to magenta. This is pushing the pigments towards the magenta section and leaving behind a trail of magenta pigments in the dark purple section. If you do this layer by layer and let each layer dry, you can slowly build up these transitions from dark to light. I think it's easy to get carried away here because of the sheer amount of tentacles to blend, but because there's so many, I don't think they individually have to be perfect. As long as they look good from 6 inches or so, I think you're good to go. For these skin tone sections, I'm using a similar technique. I'm just mixing in skin tone into my magenta color, wiping off excess moisture onto a paper towel, and I'm applying this to all of the areas on these tentacles where they should be skin tone color. Now again, I'm using very thin layers of paint here. That way I'm able to build up these layers over time and create smooth transitions. If you're using a paint that's sufficiently thin, you don't really have to change colors with each layer. You can apply one layer, let it dry, and you might notice that the layer still looks a little magenta because the magenta is showing through, and then you can just build up another layer on top. But you can see here that I do transition to lighter colors after some time. To make the paint brighter, all I'm doing is mixing in more and more skin tone into my magenta color. So it's really 2 colors, magenta and my brightener. And then as I want to increase the brightness, I just add more and more of that brightener into the mixture. As I apply increasingly brighter paints, I'm also focusing on smaller areas. Just remember that finished is better than perfect. You can take a lot of time on this step. I know I did, but in the end, I think if you achieve results that look good, you're good to go. For finishing up his hair, I then did a quick dry brush using pallid witch flesh on his tongue and the tips of the dark purple sections on the hair. This just brings out some of the detail and edge highlights the model. After finishing up that dry brushing step, I then wanted to paint his eyeballs. So the first thing I did for the eye is that I painted it dark brown, and then I mixed that brown with orange to create a dark orange color, and then painted this around the outer edge of the eye. After finishing this layer very slowly and carefully, I then used yellow ochre to paint the centermost section of his eye. The other Beast of Nurgle faces I think are kind of cool, but this one in particular with the Cyclops eye just really caught my eye. I think it looks really cool. After finishing that layer, I finished off the eye by dotting the very center with black. For this I used a needle brush and I did it off camera. And that is how you paint this very happy Beast of Nurgle. I did a couple things off camera, like I painted the green goop coming out of his tentacles, and I painted his dog tag. For his dog tag, I was going for a bronze gold non-metallic metal look. My favorite part of this model is a toss-up between the hair and the skin. The hair looks really cool with the dark purple transitioning to the brighter pink magenta, and the skin was completely dry brushed and looks fantastic. Well, anyways, if you like the video, like and subscribe, and I hope that you have a great day just like this Beast of Nurgle.